So hello, Tom.
Hello, Vanessa.
So today I'm here with Tom Campbell. He is a retired NASA physicist, a consciousness researcher, and also the author of trilogy My Big Toe, or MBT, My Theory of Everything. Now, Tom, you created this theory of everything that explains the nature of reality and our purpose here for existence, which are really big topics. And what I love about it is you did it without including any dogma or belief or indoctrination. And you recommend that your readers have an open mind, but also be very skeptical. Mm-hmm. So can you talk about why that is so important to read your book with?
Well, first off, one of the goals of my book was to provide an on-ramp for those people who are left-brained, which just means who live their life through logical process. Right-brained folks have many on-ramps. They have a superhighway full of literature, full of books, ways that they can access a larger reality. They can understand the bigger picture in which we live. Mm-hmm. But the left-brainers don't. When the left-brainers pick up a book that talks about things non-physical, about things paranormal, about things even philosophical, typically they put the book back down because it's not logical. Mm-hmm. They can't get there through logical process. Right. They get through page 1, page 2, and then a miracle occurs to get you to page 3, and they put it down because they say, no, I'm not going there. Yeah, so exactly. I'm a scientist, and I spent probably 40 years researching consciousness, and about that many years doing physics as well. Mm-hmm. And it was my goal to have a path toward understanding the bigger picture, understanding consciousness and how it works, what you can do with your consciousness, what maybe limitations are, and to have it entirely logical so that any scientist, mathematician, lawyer, people who work out of their left brain could follow it without any assumptions, that they have to believe in. Right. No belief. So that's one reason. I wanted the on-ramp for the left brain because the left brain people are they're the dominant force in our culture. Mm-hmm. They're mostly the movers and the shakers, the lawmakers, the people that affect us most directly. Absolutely. The corporate leaders, mm-hmm. mostly left brain, mostly work on logical process. So we need a way for them to get to a bigger picture. And they won't go without it being science, without it being logic. Yeah. So that was one thing. And the other thing was that it is science. Once you understand consciousness, mm-hmm. then you realize that it's not, it doesn't take any leaps of faith. Mm-hmm. Consciousness is a thing that can be explained by science. The paranormal just becomes normal. Right. That's what science does. It takes things that used to be unknown, mystical, can't understand it, and it turns them into things that are known and you can understand it. Mm. And it's a good policy in any part of your life, whether it's looking at big pictures, studying consciousness or not, to be skeptical. Absolutely. Skeptical of everything. Right. Beliefs are a large part of the problem. A belief is a trap. Mm. When you believe something, you're not open to things that are outside that belief. Mm-hmm. So we need to get rid of those beliefs, be open-minded mm-hmm. and skeptical, both. That's the only way really to make progress mm-hmm. in any direction, is to be open-minded and to be skeptical.
For sure, I completely resonate with that. Yeah. Yeah, and so that's why, for me growing up, I was never able to adapt to a religion or be part of any kind of dogma whatsoever. I dabbled in Christianity, Buddhism, even Hare Krishna, but I was always really skeptical, which is great because it opened me up to discovering big truth. And so when I came across your model a couple of years ago, a good friend of mine recommended I watch your YouTube videos, and I couldn't get into them because I found them really dry and just so logical and so left-brained that for me I just found it really boring. So fortunately, my good friend went to the Monroe Institute, and he worked with you for 5 days. And every day that he was there, he was messaging me saying how amazing you were and that you were like Einstein reincarnated. And I thought, okay, well, let me go check this guy out. So then, of course, I went to the Monroe Institute about a year and a half ago, and I worked with you. And you blew me away because you are what I see as the real deal, completely authentic. And since then, I've been really studying your model. The Monroe Institute, that was actually really good timing because you took a hiatus from that, right? I know you helped to create that, and then...
Yeah. Yeah, I ran into Bob Monroe about 1972. He had written his first book, hadn't yet started writing his second book. He had built a lab for studying consciousness because he had this out-of-body experience, not on purpose, but it just happened to him. Scared him half to death. He wondered whether he was insane. He went to psychiatrist. After about a year or so of struggling with it, he realized that he wasn't insane. It was just something that he had, some quirk, made him do that. And then he started to play with it and experiment with it. And he realized that it was real. He could get information that he shouldn't have been able to get. He could see things and understand things that otherwise he wouldn't have. So once he realized it was real, then he wanted to study it. He wanted to make it science. He wanted to open it up so he wasn't just the weird old man who, had funny experiences. He wanted to put it on the map as science. He wanted to put it on the map as legitimate. And that's when I met him. So I helped him build that lab and put it together. Myself and another, I'm the physicist, had a double E, electrical engineer, also joined me. So we put together equipment, and then we became the guinea pigs. That was the deal. We'd do his lab if he'd teach us how to go out of body. Because if we didn't experience it, then it wouldn't have been real to us. It just would have been about Bob and Bob's experience. And it had to be our experience. So he did, and he taught us how to go out of body whenever we wanted to. It became an easy thing to do. And then I spent, the next 35 years trying to figure out how it all worked, because that's what I do. I'm a physicist, so I want to understand, how does it work? What is it? Why is it? Where did it come from? What can you do with it? Why do the things work the way they do? So then I spent a long time working on that. And the advantage I had is I didn't have to work on it from a perspective of this reality. I did a lot of my research in the non-physical, in an out-of-body state. So there, if you can go back to the same state, in the same place, over and over again, you can start doing good scientific research there. In other words, you can have an experience, do something, create an effect, and then change one variable. Do it again, see what effect that variable had on it, and then change another variable. So it's tedious work, but so is science tedious work. You just change variables and see what happens and where it goes, and we have questions of, how it's working and making sense. So I started constructing a model. And then by 1997, something where mid-1990s, I started writing it down because I realized that as long as it just stays in your head, it's fuzzy. It's like, well, I know what I mean, but I can't quite say it, and it's hard to explain. Well, when you write it down, you have to say it. You have to explain it when you write it down. So I thought writing would bring clarity to where there was fuzz. So I started writing it down, and 5 years later I had a set of books. I didn't actually even start out to write a book. I just was writing it down. And it just turned into so much material that it ended up not with one book, but 3 books. I had to chop it up into pieces just so it wasn't so thick.
And overwhelming.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and overwhelming. So.
And you started writing this, or you left the Monroe Institute. You helped to establish it or create it in the 70s?
Yeah, in the 70s. Yeah, one of the things that made the Monroe Institute possible was a technology called binaural beats. Right. And Dennis and I had found the binaural beats, experimented with them, found that they could be used very effectively, and introduced them to Bob. And Bob integrated them into his own sound. He had a sound that basically was a relaxing sound. It had a sort of a surfy, well, it wasn't exactly surf, but it had a surf kind of sound to it, and it had a 4 hertz rhythm to it that was arrived at by his own experience. He found that, and he was about ready to go out of body, his body would vibrate at about 4 hertz, 4 cycles per second. So he had this surf sound modulated and the 4 hertz sound to help encourage that. But then once we added the binaural beat to it, we could manipulate that 4 hertz a lot better. And that then turned into what's now called hemisync. Mm-hmm. Bob got a patent on that, and then he added to it, and it was improved over years and changed and whatever, but that was really the origins of hemisync. And because we were so successful with that, people started to knock on the door saying, we want to participate in your research. Right. And then he had so many people that he decided to hold like a little weekend workshop thing where people would come in and we'd play these sounds for them and lead them through some exercises. And that got to be so popular that Dennis and I and Nancy Lee Honeycutt, which is Bob's stepdaughter, Dennis and I shifted from research to trainers. And now we were flying all over the country giving these talks and experiences. Okay. There was a bunch of headsets, that everybody would wear. That was before we had things like, little MP3 players, right. So we had a whole harness with headsets coming off of it, which is something we built ourselves, and then we fly someplace and get 20 or 30 people laying on the floor with these headsets going out from this harness. So that's the way it started. Yeah. And it got so popular that Bob saw a business. Mm-hmm. He was a businessman. That was his thing. He owned a cable company. And he saw a business, so then he eventually formed a corporation, TMI, which was running that business, and then he built the Monroe Institute, and all the rest of that then's history. So, so Dennis and I were there years before there was such a thing as TMI or the Monroe Institute. Oh, okay. Because of the time we got to be trainers, it was just too much. We had young kids, wives, and full-time jobs on top of doing our research, on top of then being trainers, and I think that was more than we could deal with. So we kind of trained other people and then kind of slipped out the back and let others take it on. Oh. That was maybe 75, 77, somewhere in there. And then eventually, I guess another 5 or 10 years later, Bob put me on the board of directors of TMI. And I did that for about a decade until Bob passed away. So I connected to TMI, at the roots and on and off, but then I haven't really been associated with them for a long time until the year before last. I did a program of which you were one of the attendees there.
That was your return to TMI.
But it was basically, I didn't do it as a TMI program. I did it as an MBT, My Big Toe program. Yeah. TMI was just the facility. Yeah. They had all the facility for doing that sort of thing.
Yeah. I'm super thankful for you putting that program on at TMI because it introduced me to your work, and since then I've been really doing my best to apply the principles of MBT into my life, and it's given me a lot of clarity. Now I have a knowing of what my purpose is. It's given me meaning to life. I'm aligned with my mission. And I attribute a lot of that to this model that you've created. This model is like a map that, for me, helps me to navigate my way through life.
Yeah, that's an aspect of it that sometimes surprises people, because when we talk about it as a model of reality, right? It's a Tao theory of theory of everything. A Tao. So that makes it sound like it's mostly either philosophy or science, which it is both of those. But besides that, it's also personal. It's about living. It's about life. It's about purpose. It's about how to maximize that life to be happy and productive and get out of the cycle of struggle. Constant struggle is where most people live. So once you understand the nature of consciousness, then you can understand the nature of yourself. You are consciousness. And you can understand physics as well, which was kind of a freebie that fell out for me. Though I'm a physicist, I didn't write it because of the physics. I wrote it initially as a model of consciousness. Then I found out that it made good sense and could explain physics. I guess if I wasn't a physicist, I wouldn't have noticed it at all. But it's almost embarrassing that it took me so long to notice that, being a physicist. But I did notice it, and the very same principles that explain consciousness make sense out of quantum mechanics. You can look at quantum mechanics from a different perspective, from a perspective of virtual reality, which is one of my tools for understanding consciousness. And suddenly quantum mechanics is no longer a weird science. It's a very logical science. So it solves that puzzle. And relativity also was based on a puzzle, which is why is speed of light constant. It solves that puzzle. So then I started looking for other puzzles, and I found out that all of the outstanding paradoxes in physics were easily explainable, logically explainable, from the same fundamental principles that explain consciousness. So that was then wow, I didn't realize I would do that, so that was a good thing to add to it, because that then gave me a warm feeling that it had a higher probability of being correct if it actually could do good science.
Absolutely.
And fortunately, the scientists all along have kind of been moving toward that same conclusion. So in the last decade or so, the scientists have, more and more of them have realized that a viewpoint that this reality is information, that's getting pretty popular inside of physics departments now. And that's what consciousness is. Consciousness is information. And if you see all of this as an information system, then it all makes sense.
Rather than a material-based.
Rather than a material-based system.
Reality. Yeah. And this isn't new either, right? I mean, Buddha said it 2,500 years
Yeah.
ago.
He did. He said, that this reality was an illusion.
Right.
This is exactly the same as saying it's a virtual reality, or that it's an information-based reality.
Yeah. And I love how you've pointed out too, in a previous talk, how this has been well known to us, that this is just an illusion. However, that concept has stayed in the margins because science hasn't brought it on board, and scientists
Right.
are the high priests.
Sure, anybody can experience and discover all the same things that the Buddha did, that I did, that thousands of other people have, because it's all inside. We're consciousness, so all those answers are in there. If you look, seriously enough for them and work at finding them, they're all there. So we have for many thousands of years understood the fundamental nature of reality. It's just never made it to the big time. And now, to get into that big time, it has to be science. It has to be logic. And I think that's going to make a really big difference, because now the same logic, like I say, is better physics. And better physics will eventually win. The truth will always float to the top sooner or later.
That's right.
So I am very confident that we will get there, and that it's not that far away.
Tom, I think I mentioned to you before how we created a nonprofit organization. It's called Low Entropy. And basically what our organization stands for is we create a safe space for people to come and take different workshops or programs, come and attend support groups, where they can get in touch with their truth, discover big truth, find a path that works for them, and learn more about themselves, identify their fears, and then take the steps that are necessary to overcome those fears. Now, your model is pretty much what was the catalyst to get this started, because your model gave me clarity and put me on that path, and now I'd like to also help others. But what I find is that because I look at you as such a role model, not only here in this physical matter reality, in terms of how you raise your children, all the work that you do, how you support people, but also that you're able to remote view, remote heal, go out of body at will, parallel process. Because you have these abilities, or because you are evolved to a point where you can do this, I often find myself saying, well, if I come across a challenge, I'll say, what would Tom Campbell do? And I want to, I don't want to lose myself there. I know that I need to be more, well, what would Vanessa do? But the thing is, what Vanessa's done for the last 37 years has brought me to where I am today, which is nowhere close to where you are. So I guess my question is, how can one make sure to follow their own path and stay in tune with who they really are, without losing themselves to a belief system, of creating a belief system around MBT, for example?
Okay, well, first off, I would say it would be a mistake to try to be like anybody else other than yourself. You need to be who you are. Trying to be like me or anybody else is not the right way to go about growing up. So the first thing you need to do is figure out who you are. Become authentic. The idea here is to get rid of fear. Fear is the thing that makes us dysfunctional. Fear is the thing that pushes us into poor choices. Fear is the thing that makes us unhappy, miserable, that gives us struggle and pain in our life. So if we can just get rid of that fear, then all of the problems we have kind of melt away, and they're replaced with things like happiness and joy and satisfaction. So that's easy to say, get rid of your fear. It's a hard thing to do, but we first start with being authentic, because if you're not authentic, then you can't change yourself, because you don't own yourself. Being authentic means you own yourself. Then you can change it. Being authentic is a difficult thing for a lot of people, particularly kind of my target audience, which tends to be the left-brainers. Most of those folks have no idea who they are at an authentic level, because they live out of their heads. Right. Their life, their reality is defined by what they think, who they think they are, what they think they are, how they think they should be. All of that then defines who they are, but that's more image than fact.
Yeah, ego.
That's a lot of ego, and fear creates ego, and fear creates belief. So the process is to get people to see themselves within the context of something larger than just their own actions, I guess. Our world tends to put us at the center of our own universe. And that's a place of ego, and that's a place of fear. So just seeing that you're a part of a bigger thing, that you're just an interactor with, hundreds of other people, and that what you do and say and think affects those other people, and what they do and say and think affects you. And if you can just get that idea that you're a part of something larger, that's a good place to start to find your authentic self of who you are and how you interact in that space. It's a difficult task for left-brainers. It's an easy task for right-brainers because they're very intuitive to begin with.
Right.
So they don't struggle with logical process. They intuit where they're going, where they are, and who they are. But it's a tough road for most people who have to have logical process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Seeing a bigger picture. And the second thing that's most important is a desire. They have to really want to grow up. They have to really want to change their life of struggle.
Yeah, and that's why your model is so valuable, because it gives people a premise to understand purpose and meaning and what's the whole point of existence.
Right, there is a purpose. It's not, many people, particularly logic-based people, would say there is no purpose. We're just here and we interact and we do what we do, and there is no point or purpose other than having fun, having a good time. If they're a little better people than that, they'd say being moral, being ethical. But they don't see a purpose. But in fact, there is a purpose to our existence. We are here for a very specific purpose. And finding that out lets you then work toward that purpose. And when you're working toward becoming what you really need and want to be, then you start making a lot more progress and you start feeling better about yourself. And life is not such a difficult thing to negotiate. Even the hard things become challenges that are fun rather than situations that are miserable that you have to get through.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And being a truth seeker, or somebody who's always been looking for purpose and meaning my whole life, I found that all these other philosophies or religions, there was no weight to them because I couldn't add the left brain logical process to it. So thank you for providing a model that is an on-ramp to get onto, to see this bigger picture of what everybody is saying, which is we're here to be loved, we're here to evolve. They're saying it in different ways, but your model says makes it so clear. And it does logically make sense to me. So now that's where I got this, I get it now. It finally makes sense. So I'm just really appreciative of the fact that you could do that.
Well, I really appreciate it that you found that it works for you. That's the point.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work for you, then you let it go.
Exactly.
Try something else. If it does work for you, then take the next step. So it doesn't really work for everybody. Everybody's not ready to take those steps. And you can't push people to grow up. You can't push people to see the world any differently than they see it. You can only give them an opportunity to change themselves. You can't change them. So when you set up this organization, your nonprofit, that'll be a challenge. You see, it's not like here's a program and if you take it, you come out the other end happy. It's not going to work like that. You have an opportunity to change yourself. Most people think they would be happy if they could just change the world to suit them. But that's not where it comes from. You have to change yourself to integrate into that world in a productive way. That's the way the happiness comes from. And that means you have to get people to completely reassess who they are, why they're here, and find that authentic being and begin to live it. And then when you live your authenticness, if it doesn't work, now you can change it because you're authentic. You own it. You can change it. But getting people to go there will be a big challenge. But I suspect you'll only attract the people who are ready, who are interested in that. Those are the people who will come. The people who aren't ready won't show up at the doorstep anyway.
I've heard you say too, when you start getting rid of your fear and letting go of the darkness and you let your own light shine, then it lights the path for other people too.
It does.
Awesome.
Yeah, the best way to fix the world, we say, this world's so awful. It's, all the nastiness that's here, all the greed and all the crime, all the using of other people and so on. That's an accurate reflection of who we are. That's an accurate reflection of the quality of the consciousness of us, human beings. It's not that we can, if we could just change that, corporate head, or we could just change that political leader, we could just change, the people at the top, then everything would be fine. It doesn't work that way. Those people at the top are a mirror of us. The only way to save the world is to save yourself first. You need to grow up. You need to become more caring, more cooperative, a more loving person, a more giving person. And as you do that, it changes all the people around you. Actually, what it does is it helps them change themselves. And that's the way to go. So all of you who are running this little corporation need to be these examples, need to be those shining lights that encourage the other people to find their light and turn it on as well.
Thank you. Well, you're part of this too.
Yeah, and I really appreciate your work, you see. I can go around and talk, and that doesn't really amount to a whole lot unless people like you go do something about it, you see. That's what's important. Not my talking is kind of a step one, but it's not going to go anywhere very important unless there's people like you, Vanessa, who say, well, this is working for me. I need to help other people. Let's do something here that's part of the solution rather than part of the problem. Right. And that's what's important. So when I see things like this starting and people energized and ready to go out and do it, then that's good. That's what it's all about, you know.
And that's the thing too, is that you're so encouraging and supportive. For someone, I feel very, very, very ordinary, just a regular person who has a lot of fear, insecurities, inadequacies. But I know that my mission and my responsibility is to grow and become love. And because I'm doing that, because I've had help from other people, guides and mentors such as yourself, because I've had that, I don't want to say privilege, I've had that opportunity. I feel now I have a responsibility to also help others, to give them that opportunity as well.
That's the way it works.
Yeah, because we never just evolve, and we're always evolving, and
right.
Part of evolving is helping others as well, right?
It's all connected, yeah. We're all connected to each other. So the helping is the natural way to extend that.
Yeah. Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome. Thank you, Vanessa.